first of all, explain your role with Blue Wave Collective and what changed for you recently.
Yeah, so the last couple of days, we made a group decision to name me director of the collective. And what that really entails these days is navigating relationships with a couple of key groups. Number one is always going to be our donors. We could not provide the level of support that we do to Utah State without our good donors. And so working with them is obviously a really important piece. The second is obviously our coaches and their teams, so their players. And then the third is the athletic department and the administration at the university. And so my role at this point is to kind of navigate and maintain relationships with all of those groups and make sure that our mission to provide a competitive edge to Utah State athletics continues to get pushed forward.
So this the whole concept of name, image, likeness was initially intended to be if an athlete wanted to put on their own camp, they could earn some money to do that. If somebody wanted to ask them to help do a commercial to endorse their product, they could do that. But then it also morphed into just basic, it seemed to be just pay for play. We're going to line up amount of money to give you just to get you to come here as part of the recruitment process. How has that kind of changed, or is that still part of what's going on with name, image, likeness with this recent House settlement?
Yeah. So like you said, I think the initial change was a good one. You think of guys like Johnny Manziel, Johnny Football, what he could have been making legally. And I think it moved us in the right direction to say, hey, an athlete can capitalize on their own name, image, and likeness. It just made sense. But you're right. It very quickly devolved, I would say, into a mechanism for schools to use money to incentivize players to show up at a university and play, or to incentivize players to stay at a university, right? I think another portion of the problem ended up being the way the transfer portal evolved, where kids have multiple points in any given year that they can transfer out of an institution, a lot of times without any loss of eligibility. And the reality is that most schools have to manage those deals under the guise of NIL. Your contract saying the public-facing piece kind of says, like, this is name, image, and likeness. But the real guts of it is you're doing it to help build more competitive teams for your athletics programs, whether it's basketball, football, women's basketball, whatever it is at a university. But that is still the reality of it. And the same goes for the revenue sharing model. We have the ability for the school to put in a piece of the pie now and to help us with some of the mechanics of managing payments and contracting and those sorts of things. But I think what you're seeing in this shift into revenue sharing is that schools are attempting to use the revenue that gets shared to build up the revenue producing sports, right? It has to kind of stay in that monetary loop. So you're not really seeing the NIL piece get pushed as hard now that we can say rev share, but it still has that same flavor to it. But it feels a lot more like pay for play than anything else.
How much is, we see that the cap is supposed to be $20.5 million, and Utah State's not making $20.5 million in revenue. So what are we seeing kind of initially on what that revenue share opportunity would look like here at a local level?
Yeah, so I guess a couple of things. Number one, from a clerical perspective, Utah State has opted into revenue sharing. The NCAA gave everybody a year to decide if they were going to do it, and then you're obligated to opt in next year. We opted in because whether you opted in or not, you were going to have to pay some of the costs associated with it. So we figured, we would just take the option, right? Give ourselves options moving forward. The standard messaging that we've gotten from the athletic department is that even though we're opted in, we are not a positive revenue producing school. Most of our sports lose money year over year, with football being the exception at times. And so despite the fact we're opted in, we are expecting no revenue to come out of Utah State to pay athletes in the next year. I couldn't give you all the details of that. That's more of an athletic director decision. I think some of it comes down to our departure from the Mountain West and the timing of the money that we'll be getting out of the Pac-12 when that comes the following year. So the opportunity, the revenue sharing cap, as you mentioned, is very high. what we're expecting or what's been committed from the school as of now is still zero.
So with the just kind of working through things with the different athletes, the different team sports that Utah State has, we had a conversation with Wesley Brooks just a few weeks ago, and he was kind of talking about some of his challenges of building a team and lamenting that he had a zero NIL budget. And I recognize there are going to be some programs, some teams that just unfortunately are not going to have NIL budgets associated to them, while others are going to have a lot more attention their way because of what they generate in kind. How has that been working out so far in your observations in the Blue Wave Collective in trying to make sense of some of that and getting money where it goes to help keep certain players in Logan, but also develop opportunities for others?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's a couple of things we've tried to weigh out at the collective. And the first is that in general, our sentiment is that it's a lot easier to keep a team on top of a pile than it is to build a team all the way up from zero and get them to the top of the Mountain West or the pack. And so as an example, we feel like it's easier for us to keep us towards the top of the Mountain West in this next year in a sport like basketball than it may be to take some other sport and, build from last place to first place. The investment is going to be kind of disproportionate in our opinion. The second piece is that, I'm a football guy. I played football here. I don't want to say anything bad about football, but last year was a tough year, right? Tough to watch, tough for fans to really appreciate and want to show up to games at times. But at the end of the day, football at this school, with the way the revenue works out internally and the way that it funds a lot of other sports, football has to lead the way. And so our decision-making process has always been football first. And with the way things have gone since Blue Wave's inception, basketball second. And then we have started to, in the last couple of, let's call it 6 months, we've worked a little bit with women's volleyball, and we've given Coach Brooks a small budget for women's basketball to help him take on a couple of players that we feel like will make a really big difference for their team going forward. And so there is no perfect answer to it, unfortunately. A lot of it is just what we're hearing and feeling and the general momentum of a program with the understanding that football has to succeed at a school like this. And even as you look at other universities and what they're doing in the revenue sharing space, everybody has their own magic formula of here's the 4 programs, here's the 6 programs, or we're dealing in everyone and no one's going to have the budget they want. Every school has their own answer to it right now.
What is, I know you've had to have, and you mentioned this earlier, you have to have a close working relationship with the athletic department, but you're not really part of the athletic department. So how does that really work? Because you're affecting those that are attached to that institution. So you definitely play a role, but so how does that work? What is that relationship really like? And how does that changing with some of these recent decisions that have come through?
Yeah, so let's talk prior to June 6th, which was pre-House settlement. Blue Wave Collective is an independent 501c3. Everyone on our staff is a volunteer. We do this because we love the Aggies, we love sports here, we're all business people, and we wanted to help out. We've had a good relationship with the athletics department, though, whether it's Diana, her staff, development, guys like Corey Hansfield, Bobby Nash in the athletics department, whoever it is, they've all been great to us. And we do end up having to work together because the decisions we make as a collective directly affect the success that the basketball team or the football team can have because of the roster that they're able to field. That's just kind of the economics behind the thing. And so initially, in 2023, let's call it, our relationship with the athletic department was a little bit more rocky. As of late, especially under Diana, we've had a much better relationship with them. And as an example, we had a really successful fundraiser in March that the athletic department helped us put on, let us use the West Stadium Center, helped us take care of the food and different things like that. So we've had a much better relationship with them now. It is going to change going forward. I know the athletic department is in their second round of interviews for an associate athletic director of NIL. They're going to hire someone in-house, and that person is going to be responsible for sourcing NIL deals and helping fundraise at the school. And my hope is that we can get in a better position with the athletic department and with the institution itself, meaning Utah State, so that Blue A can fundraise and direct some of that money into the school so that donors can get institutional donor benefits. Right? So if you donate to the school, you can get parking passes, preference points for seating, whatever it is. And right now, Blue A can't give you those. And I'd like to see us develop a slightly better working relationship where those things can go into the school, the donors can give to the school, get their benefits back, and then the school and whoever they hire to run NIL there can help us run an effective program to keep Coach Mendenhall and Coach Calhoun competitive in their respective sports.
Actually, Dalton, looks like a release was sent earlier this afternoon. Tony Hirel was announced as a senior compliance administrator, but he was going to be promoted to Senior Associate Athletics Director of Compliance and Student Athlete Services, saying that one of his main roles is with name, image, and likeness regulation. So maybe not quite exactly, but so it looks like some of those same lines. They're moving forward in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's another burden that's arisen out of the system is any outside deal. So if the school's not paying the money via rev share, any of the deals that the collective is writing have to be audited by a system called NIL Go. It's managed by Deloitte. And you have to plug in the contract to the system. You have to put in everything the athlete is responsible for doing. You have to put in how they're getting compensated. Is it cash? Is it a material benefit? What's the value of the material benefit? And then someone in the athletics department actually has to look up the entity that's paying and, basically plug in some information about them. Are they a big lifetime donor? The NCAA is basically trying to figure out, is this what they consider true NIL, or is it more of a pay-for-play situation? And I've worked with Tony quite a bit in the last 2 weeks. I mean, between me and that guy, we must have put 60 man-hours into getting all of our Blue A deals into the NIL Go system, dealing with the quirks of that website, him opening up support tickets for things that weren't working the way they were supposed to. And so the fundraising and contracting piece aside, there's a compliance piece now because of the way the College Sports Commission and NIL Go is running that sounds like Tony is going to have to just take that on as a big part of his job now.
Have you found in doing this and being a part of it for a few years now, have you found that for some people it's a bit of a challenge to decide, do I donate to Blue A Collective? Do I donate directly to the players, or do I donate to the athletic department because that's going to go for facilities and travel or scholarships? Is it become a challenge, or is it not really that hard of a sell to differentiate some of that?
I think people, when we go to talk to them, they typically have their own opinion already. And what I mean by that is they already have an opinion, love or hate, on NIL in general. The amount of people that end up in limbo with like Blue A as an independent organization versus donating directly to Utah State as an institution is typically very low. And I'd say there's a couple that literally the tipping point of giving to the institution has been institutional donor benefits. Like they want to continue to get their points. They want their parking passes. They want those things and it's important to them. And so they choose to donate to the school. But I would say less about that and more about just the concept of NIL, that some people are very opposed to the kids getting paid, the guys or girls getting paid. And that tends to be the decision maker in my experience.
From what I understand, the Blue A Collective is set up in a way that players have to be able to achieve certain benchmarks. Some of those are more time sensitive than anything else before they can get distributions for the money that they could have access to. Explain how that works and how that is meant to try to keep students and keep these athletes on campus longer, and how well that's working.
Yeah, so we've tried to be really strategic about when we're paying guys. And there's a number of reasons for it. But number one is we found out the hard way early on that if you take a young kid and you give them a lot of money, they're probably going to spend it all. And they'll end up in the middle of their season feeling like you never paid them, right? Or they're getting the short end of the stick. So it's almost like managing morale and the logistics of a team was one of the first lessons that we learned. But like, okay, you have to have a more effective payment schedule to control for these kids and their own behavior, right? That ends up being one important piece of it. The second one is there's obviously a lot of benchmarks around transfer portal windows. The last thing we would ever want to do is get a verbal commitment from a kid, make a payment, and then have them never show up on campus. That would be counterintuitive to everything we're trying to do. And so we are strategic about when we pay to make sure that the guys are on campus, that there is no opportunity for them to transfer away, and then we'll pay some portion of the contract. The other thing is we've tried to be really strategic about our payment dates and backloading our contract. So, the guys have an incentive to get through the end of their respective season, whether it's football, going into December or potentially even January under the right circumstances, basketball at the end of March, whatever it is. Just making sure that they have that incentive to finish school strong, get good grades, don't affect the team in any negative way once you're out of your season. And then for some of them, it even, gives them a little bit of a kind of like the stick and carrot thing that if you're thinking about transferring away, well, we got a last payment that we want to sweeten the pot for you by inviting you to stay here. So that's a few of the things. There's more than that we've taken care of, but we've tried to be really strategic about those payment dates to keep guys here and keep them on a good trajectory.
And then my last question, it seems like Bronco Mendenhall has some very strong opinions about how his players and his program can access some of those funds. What's that relationship been like with Bronco and working with his staff, and how he kind of envisions it, how it should work with his players in accessing those kind of opportunities?
Yeah, Coach Mendenhall and his staff have been just a pleasure to work with. And I think one of the things that really helped us at Blue A is when he came in, he had a very good message to the community that these kids are going to have to work for this, right? It's not anything weird where we're just paying kids, they're getting more than they deserve, whatever else. His system is a merit-based system, and the kids that are getting paid, it's because they're hitting Coach Mendenhall's milestones inside of his system. And for any of you that have had the opportunity to look, he's not handing out money for free. He is working these kids and helping them prepare to be good football players, good men, good students, all of those sorts of things. So, like I said, they've been just great to work with. And I think his system of earned versus given is going to show up on the field for us as we go into the fall. So I've been really excited about that relationship.
Okay, so I lied. I actually have two more quick questions. This is actually coming in from our text line, 3714, asking, where are you from? And the second question is, does Title IX require females to get similar money to the males?
Great questions. So where am I from? I grew up in Grapevine, Texas. It's between Dallas and Fort Worth in the Metroplex area. If you've ever flown into Dallas, that's actually Grapevine. So I finished high school down there. I came to Utah, and I actually played 2 years of Snow College, and then transferred up here, and I played 2015 and 2016 under Coach Wells, and then I've just stayed here. I loved Cache Valley. It was good to me. Got married. Have 4 kids now, so we're here. We're lifers. We're in Smithfield. Title IX, man, that's a great question. And Title IX is what's looming over Utah State's head right now. We all know we've had some issues arise in the last couple of years. There's probably some ongoing litigation there, if my understanding is correct. Title IX is a really sore point for legal counsel on campus right now, as we can probably all understand. When we talk about revenue sharing, we're dealing in the land of unknown. And most schools are opting into revenue sharing. Most schools and their legal counsel are developing some sort of opinion on Title IX as it relates to revenue sharing. But there have been no firm guidelines from the NCAA or even the Department of Education. And we even got kind of a flippy-floppy answer where Department of Education under Biden put out a memo and said one thing, and then Department of Education under Trump came out with a memorandum and kind of said the opposite, that revenue sharing was not going to be subject to Title IX. And I'm seeing all sorts of opinions about it. I have some schools saying that, the fact of the matter is a lot of the women's sports lose revenue. And so them getting any sort of revenue sharing is already disproportionately equitable in that, they're getting money when their sports typically do not generate money. I don't know if that's a valid legal stance or not, but that's what I'm hearing in certain places. And so the thing I would have everyone understand here is that's been a big issue for us to work through. And our collective and even Diana and the athletic department is still working with general counsel at Utah State to develop a framework for us to move forward with revenue sharing in a way that is Title IX compliant and that feels defensible to them, so that everyone can feel good about the decisions we're making and the way we're paying out this money.
Dalton, great stuff. We'll have to have you on again another time, and really interesting to see how this continues to evolve. But appreciate your time today, and best of luck with the new position with the Blue Way Collective.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.